In a small African village, there was a forest that no one dared to enter. The villagers called it the sacred forest. From the time of their ancestors, it was known as a place of spirits, shadows, and death. The elders always warned the children, never go there. Do not even stand near the trees after sunset. The forest does not forgive. The forest was thick and dark. During the day, the sunlight could barely touch the ground. At night, strange sounds came from within. Sometimes it was the cry of a baby, sometimes the laugh of a woman, and sometimes whispers that floated in the wind. Those whispers were the most dangerous. It was said that if you listened closely, the whispers would call your name. Once you heard your name, the spirits would follow you, even back to your home. Many years ago, people had disappeared after hearing those voices. Their bodies were never found. But the young people of the village did not always believe the old stories. They thought the elders only used fear to control them. Among these youth was Kweku, a proud and fearless young man. He would often laugh at the warnings. "These are just tales to keep us inside at night," he would say. "There are no spirits, only trees and animals." Still, the forest carried a heavy presence. Even the bravest hunters avoided its edge. No one cut wood from its trees. No one dared to drink from the stream that flowed out of it. The villagers lived with respect and fear, as though the forest was alive, watching them. Kweku, however, felt drawn to it. Every night, as he sat outside his hut, he could almost hear something calling him from the shadows of the sacred forest. Curiosity began to grow in his heart, and with it, a dangerous desire to discover the truth. Kweku was not a man who believed in fear. He was strong, proud, and always wanted to prove himself braver than others. Whenever the elders spoke about the sacred forest, he would laugh loudly and shake his head. "If there are truly spirits inside, let them come out and show themselves," he would say, making the other young men laugh. But in truth, Kweku's curiosity was growing stronger every day. The more he heard about the forest, the more he wanted to see it with his own eyes. At night, when the moonlight touched the trees, he thought he saw shadows moving. When the wind blew, he swore he heard voices calling his name. The whispers came soft at first, like the rustle of leaves, but each night they seemed to grow closer. One evening, Kweku called his closest friends Kojo, Mensa, and Amma. He told them, "Let us go into the forest and see the truth. We are not children anymore. Why should we live in fear of old stories?" His friends looked at one another nervously. They had also heard the whispers, though none of them admitted it. At first, they refused. "The elders warned us. If we go, something bad will happen," Mensa said quietly. But Kweku was clever with his words. He mocked their fear, saying, "Are you not ashamed? Hunters go after lions and leopards, yet you are afraid of wind and shadows." Slowly, his confidence began to break their resistance. Finally, under the cover of darkness, The four of them agreed to enter the sacred forest. Their hearts beat fast as they crossed the invisible line between the village and the trees. The night was silent at first, but soon a sound came, a soft whisper floating through the air, calling out a name. They froze, staring at each other. The forest had begun to welcome them. The deeper Kweku and his friends walked into the sacred forest, the darker it became. The moonlight vanished behind the tall trees, and even the air felt heavy, as if the forest itself was watching them. Every step they took made the dry leaves crack under their feet, but the sound quickly faded into the silence that surrounded them. Suddenly, a soft glow appeared ahead. At first, they thought it was fireflies, but the light was strange. It moved slowly, floating between the trees as if it was alive. Amma whispered, "Maybe it is a spirit," but Kweku shook his head. "It's nothing, just insects." Still, his voice carried a hint of doubt. As they followed the light, the whispers grew louder. This time, each one of them clearly heard their names being called. Kojo, Mensa, Amma. The voices were soft, yet they sounded familiar, like voices from home. Kojo's face turned pale. "That sounded like my grandmother," he muttered, his hands shaking. Then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. It was tall, dressed in torn tribal clothes that looked centuries old. The figure's face was hidden in darkness, but its eyes glowed faintly. It stood silently, staring at them, and then vanished as quickly as it came. The friends froze in terror. None of them could explain what they had seen. Mensa grabbed Kweku's arm. "We should go back now. This place is cursed." But Kweku pushed his hand away. "No, it was just a trick of the light. We came here to prove our courage." Before he could finish speaking, Amma screamed. She had felt something cold brush past her ear, and then a whisper so close that it felt like someone was breathing on her skin. Her knees gave way, and she collapsed to the ground, trembling. For the first time, Kweku felt a chill in his heart. The forest was no longer just a place of stories, it was alive, and it had begun to notice them. The group hurried deeper into the sacred forest, trying to escape the whispers that circled them like the wind. Kweku tried to act brave, but his eyes kept darting from side to side. The others stayed close, afraid of being left behind. After some time, they reached an old part of the forest where the trees were thicker and older. Strange carvings were cut into their trunks, shapes of men with twisted bodies, faces screaming in pain, and hands stretched upward as if begging for help. Amma touched one of the carvings and quickly pulled her hand back. "These are not just marks," she whispered. "They are warnings." Kojo, his voice trembling, said, "My grandmother once told me a story. Long ago, the people of this land betrayed the gods. They cut down the sacred trees and spilled innocent blood. As punishment, their souls were trapped here forever. Anyone who enters this forest hears their cries and joins them in suffering." Mensa shook his head, fear filling his eyes. "That cannot be true." But even as he spoke, the whispers grew louder. This time, they did not just call names. They spoke in a strange tongue, a chant that echoed from tree to tree, making the ground tremble beneath their feet. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through, and the carvings seemed to move, their mouths opening wider in silent screams. Amma covered her ears, tears running down her face. "They are alive," she cried. The truth began to sink into them all. This was not just a forest. It was a prison of restless spirits, bound by anger and betrayal. The whispers were not random. They were hunting, searching, waiting for someone to claim. For the first time, Kweku felt the weight of fear pressing down on his chest. The curse was real, and by stepping into the forest, they had already become part of it. Darkness swallowed the sacred forest as night grew deeper. The four friends tried to turn back toward the village, but the path they had taken was no longer there. Every tree looked the same, twisting and bending like tall guards blocking their way. No matter which direction they chose, the forest seemed endless. The whispers followed them closely, no longer faint but sharp and clear. At times they sounded like their parents, at other times like lost friends. Mensa stopped suddenly, his face pale. "I just heard my brother's voice. He has been dead for 2 years." His words sent a chill through them all. Kojo began to panic. "We should not have come here. The spirits are playing with us." He tried to run, but the forest floor shifted beneath his feet. Roots rose from the ground, tangling around his ankles until he fell hard to the earth. As he struggled, the whispers grew louder around him, circling like vultures. Amma knelt beside him, trying to free his legs, but then she let out a scream. A hand, thin, gray, and bony, slipped up from the soil, gripping Kojo's arm. Another hand reached for his face. Kojo's cries filled the night as shadows dragged him deeper into the ground. Within moments, he was gone. Only the disturbed soil remained, moving as if breathing. The remaining 3 stood frozen in horror. Amma clutched Kweku's arm, sobbing. "We must leave. Please, Kweku, take us out." But Kweku, though shaken, still tried to act strong. "We cannot stop now. We will find a way." Yet as they moved forward, the forest grew even stranger. The trees leaned closer, their branches bending like arms. From the darkness, faint figures began to appear, ghostly shapes of men and women with hollow eyes, their mouths whispering endlessly. The sacred forest had awakened, and it would not let them go so easily. Only 3 remained: Kweku, Mensa, and Amma. Their bodies trembled as they stumbled through the forest, but no matter how far they ran, the whispers never left them. The air had grown icy, and every breath felt heavy, like the forest was pressing against their lungs. Suddenly, Mensa stopped walking. His eyes were wide, fixed on something in the darkness. "Do you hear that?" he asked in a strange, distant voice. Kweku and Amma listened, and the whispers grew clearer. This time, they were not random voices. It was the sound of Mensa's late father, calling him home. Before they could stop him, Mensa broke away from the group and walked toward the trees. "Father, wait for me," he shouted. Kweku ran after him, but Mensa's body was swallowed by the shadows. A scream tore through the night, then silence. Mensa was gone. Amma fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Kweku grabbed her hand, pulling her up. "We cannot give up. We must fight." But deep inside, he knew the forest wanted something more. It wanted a sacrifice. As they reached a clearing, the whispers grew into a single, heavy chant. The ground shook, and from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was the ghostly image of Kweku's mother, her face pale and her eyes glowing. She stretched out her hand and whispered, "Kweku." His heart froze. He knew it was not truly his mother, yet her voice was so real. Amma begged, "Don't listen. It's a trick." But the spirit's call was too strong. Invisible hands rose from the soil, wrapping around Kweku's legs. He fought, pulling with all his strength, but the ground opened beneath him. Amma screamed his name as he was dragged deeper, his last cry echoing through the forest. The whispers grew louder, like a victory song. Now Amma stood alone, trembling in the clearing, with the spirits closing in. When dawn finally broke, the sacred forest looked calm and peaceful, as though nothing had happened during the night. The tall trees stood silently, the leaves shining gently in the morning sun. To anyone passing by, it was just an ordinary forest. But the villagers knew better. Back in the village, people noticed that Kweku, Kojo, and Mensa had not returned. Only Amma stumbled back at sunrise, her clothes torn and her face pale with terror. She could barely speak. The elders gathered around her, demanding answers, but all she could whisper was, "The forest, it took them." The villagers were filled with fear. Some men tried to gather courage to search for the missing boys, but the elders stopped them. "No one goes into the sacred forest," they warned. "It has claimed them, and if we interfere, it will claim more." Their words carried a heavy truth that silenced everyone. Amma wept for her friends. Her eyes were empty, her spirit broken. She told the story of the whispers, the glowing figures, and how the ground itself swallowed her friends. The villagers shivered as they listened. Some believed her, others thought grief had made her mad. But all agreed on one thing: the forest had grown stronger. That night, as the villagers sat in their huts, the whispers began again. They were louder than ever, echoing across the village, carried by the wind. Mothers held their children close. Men stared at the forest's edge, praying the spirits would not step beyond the trees. The elders gathered and spoke in hushed voices. They feared the sacred forest was no longer content to stay within its borders. Its whispers had reached the village, and soon it might come for more souls. And so, the curse lived on. The sacred forest remained untouched, its shadows waiting, its whispers calling, ready for the next who dared to enter. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more exciting stories every day. Your support means the world. See you in the next video.